Hello.
Marco.
Hey, how you doing? Sorry, I'm a minute late. The perils of being back in the office. Okay, get share our agenda. And then can I get into a discussion? And I'm sharing the wrong screen. Don't do it. Not sharing the wrong screen. Can you see my the correct slides?
Agenda opens expected debug activities. Extract
Yeah,
the debug.
perfect. Yeah. All right. So okay. So any opens from anybody? I'm just gonna get into it. All right. Then let me get into sort of my opens here. So, um, we had said that at the beginning of the series that by OCP, I don't know if it rules or is it standards. There's meant to be two chairs from two different companies. So, um, I'm just gonna, and we said we're gonna, run the way we run for a little bit, and then kind of put out the, you know, co- yeah, put out a call and select the two people to lead this. Ob- Obviously, I'm putting my head out as one of them. So just gonna make calls a call to action if you're interested in leading this working group. Is yeah, if you're interested in being one of the co-chairs, you know, send me an email once we have enough, you know, have a few people receive, you put them on a doodle poll or something. The same way we did for the meeting time. Make sense? All right, and then I talked to Enrico, and it's pretty clear that the majority of us are. Enrico, it's a MIPI meeting, right?
Yeah, there's a MIPI meeting next week, face to face. So I know a couple of us will be gone at least.
Yeah. So my proposal is that we just going to cancel next week. Um, does that make sense for everybody? Austin?
Yeah, I don't have a conflict, but yeah, works for me. I can take the time back.
You can take the time back, like all of us. All right. And Ralph, I'm assuming you're at the MIPI meeting, right?
No, Stefan will be there, but it's fine anyway. So that's good.
All right, cool. And then, but I was basically, well, then let's get um, into the meat of the meeting, and look at the. What I wanted to do today is we had um, last week we had I think we started to look at this. Where we essentially have kind of extracted all the activities, kind of given out the AR to everybody to maybe also add to the list. So I was plan is essentially let's complete this list and then maybe do some prioritization where we should focus our standardization effort. And it's really, I think, to me, it's a prioritization in time. Right? I want to. It's not like one thing is more important than another one, but we gotta do something first. Um, does that make sense? Okay. So, yes. And we could remember how far we discussed this last week.
I think we talked about pieces of it. I don't think we really
Yeah.
we were running out of time, so I don't think we got into all the details, but we briefly touched on all these.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I think you're right. Um. Yeah. Let's do that and spend really more time on this here. So, the the kind of like high level use cases, at least Enrico and myself um had kind of um enumerated here, right? Is um the various flavors of dump extraction, log and trace, performance monitoring, interactive debug, and then this is a little bit less of a true debug activity, but kind of the whole idea of the various ways of setting. We're calling it setting verbosity, which so I
So
guess first question.
just a question about the configuration piece. So is that part of the verbosity? So like for log and tracing, depending on your scenario, you might actually need to configure that on the fly. Is that done through the verbosity, or will that be part of the log trace extraction?
Say a little more. I'm wondering if do you see it as a like activity you would wanna kind of call out and specifically work on?
So it's just sorry, as you know, I'm working right now in different segments, and this came up like in automotive. So the idea is because like tracing, and I think it's the same in data center. It's also like in the end like a black box. To a certain degree, you then after the fact understand what happened, how you ended up in that bad situation. And in automotive, at least, they want to do an over-the-air configuration of the traces because depending on the situation, you might want to have different trace features activated or different verbosity levels activated. The question is if that back channel to configure the sources, select the sources, if that's also somewhere covered here.
And that's going to be part of parts of dump extraction as well, right? You're going to want to say, hey, I want, real simple example would be, I want this memory address, right? You're going to have to send in some configuration to say, to indicate that. So there has to be, there's maybe a data channel in a control channel, right? Now, sometimes those are within the same protocol. Sometimes they're different, right? But I think there's an element of a control channel in most of these, right?
Yeah, well, Enrico, what goes into my head when I was listening to us, I'm wondering if it's actually the other way around. Should we have a configuration activity and then setting verbosity as as a
that's a lower, I mean, that's an aspect of it, yes.
Yeah, I think I like that. So this is
yeah, because I think we looked at this. I mean, I think this comes out of a more data view, right? But there's also that configuration channel. Now the question, I think some of the question will be is, and Rolf kind of alluded a little bit to it, is the configuration channel a totally separate channel, or is it somewhat part of the same channel as the data?
Let's see. Wait, 1 second.
There's different answers to that, right? I mean, if sometimes you need to do a write to do a read.
Yeah,
and some protocols do that, right? Yeah, I think it's it's nuanced, right? Sometimes, yeah.
I see what you're saying, right? Is this configuring it's called the global activity, or is it an aspect of all these debug activities, right? I think that
it could be an aspect of the specific debug activity, yes.
Yeah,
again, like saying, hey, I want to set up this address, or I want to set up these trace sources, or whatever, right? And that could be, as Rolf kind of said too, I mean, it could be in band, it could be a separate out of band that sets it up, right?
Yeah, or you provide this pick on crash log, right? You update a crash log recipe, right?
That's right.
That's configuration of sorts. I think that's a good question. I'm gonna leave leave it separate for right now, but probably let me record the question here.
I mean, a lot of people think a configuration is just, okay, I'm setting up a bunch of registers, right? But it also could be a little bit more, like you're saying, with the recipe. That's almost
I mean, it could
that's
be,
almost a piece of firmware sometimes, right?
yeah, I mean, it is also setup recipes. I mean, we could definitely go moderately crazy, right? And have this, these dump recipes could become like microcode, right? Or no, microcode's the wrong best. Could, yeah, as you were saying, could turn into a script, right?
Yeah, I mean, it can be. Just
Yeah.
depends. Just depends on the system, right? And I think that's where it's going to get interesting. Of okay, when we divide up all these configuration mechanisms, right? Okay, we may have to have several different types of configuration, different paths or whatever we're going to call it.
Yeah. And then part of this is definitely some kind of secure unlock, right?
Well, you have that under verbosity somehow, but
Yeah.
levels.
I have security levels, right?
Yeah.
Under verbosity, but yeah. Okay. Rolf, Austin, do you see any other like activities here that we are not capturing yet?
Can't think of anything off top of mind, but I'll take a look too afterwards, and if something comes to me, I can update the list here, or suggest an addition.
Yeah. Rolf, do you see anything missing?
Not currently, no.
All right, let's get into these details a little bit here. So so if you think about dump extraction, right? So we kind of um, um, had the kind of divided this up into a timing component. I think I think this we talked about a fair bit here, right? And then a content component, and then the question is how the relationship between collecting and extracting. So when it comes to timing, it's kind of there is the um, I would call like the poster child, right? It's like a crash log, something that's you know self-triggered or trigger built into a given component that generates generates the well triggers the generation of a dump. It could be something that comes from the user, or it could be because we had this external stimulus idea of for example basically that is coming from a different component in the system. Let's say a crash on a GPU is also triggering the a dump on the associated CPU, even that is not necessarily crashing. I think we discussed about this a lot, but anybody see any other timing components that um, should be captured here? Okay, I guess we talked about it enough then. Then the aspect of the content could either be registers or memory or some kind of state. Enrico, is there any other ones that we should probably add? Or everybody really?
No. I mean, I guess when I step back and look at dump extraction, right? Now, if I look at okay, where can we provide some value, right? So what I'm seeing is really you're showing two things, and it's really that second bullet, right? There's a configuration of the dump, right? And that's going to come down to the timing component, right? And that's really a configuration aspect. So what can we do there? Well, maybe we have a bunch of APIs that says, okay, maybe there's a timing component API that you use to set up. Is it self-triggered, user triggered, or external stimulus triggered, right? So I think there's some what we can do here as a worker.
And then the external, at least the external stimulus comes with an API that passes in the stimulus, right?
Exactly. So I think what our value from a spec perspective is okay, we can define an API that sets that up. Okay. The other part of it is the extraction. Well, what can we do? Well, from our perspective, we can set up a protocol, right? We can say, okay, let's use protocol X to bring out the extraction, right? So I mean that's kind of where I'm looking at each of these activities and saying, okay, what can this work stream provide to make this better? And like I said, with dump extraction, I see, those two things. There may be another API around the content for the collection. So maybe you need another API that says, okay, I'm going to configure what I'm going to collect and where it's going to go, right? Because you may have to set up a memory region or something to say, okay, collect this data, throw it over here for me to extract later, kind of thing. So yeah, you'll probably have some APIs or whatever to set that up. So that, if I broke it down, that's what I would think we could provide. An API for choosing what data that we want to extract, maybe where we want to put it, when we want to collect it, and then an API that says, go get it for me now, go get the extraction, and then a protocol or a data structure or data format or whatever for that. Well, actually, maybe it's two separate things: a data structure and a protocol to extract. Those are the possibilities that we could provide as part of our.
And then we said we had maybe this. We were talking about this compact human comprehensible format, right?
Exactly, that's part of the data, the data payload format. Like, okay, right. So again, I'm just looking at, okay, now with all this information, what are the possibilities of what we would want to standardize, and that's what I'm seeing. Those items.
No, I think you have that moderately right, and I think, but and maybe that's really the. Well, actually, here's my proposed process, right? We pick one of these activities here to be the first one we look at, right? And then we go, what are the things to standardize in there, work that out, and then move on to the next one. That's kind of my proposed workflow here for us as a team. Okay, so.
But I think you pulled out. I think you pulled out the pieces that we would need, right? Like will be an API for the timing component, API for the content, maybe a storage API for, okay, I want to put it here because you got to put it somewhere, right? This isn't streaming, so this is a store and download. So you need a storage location. You need okay, I want to download, and then those are the APIs we got to go figure out. And then, like I said, you probably want a data format, which could also include that compaction, and then you need then you have to define a protocol or the transport.
Yeah, I think we got this.
Yeah, and hopefully some of this stuff is just saying, okay, we're going to use protocol X, right? That's already defined. I don't expect us to create new things necessarily, not for all of this. So,
like we used before. We use existing before invent, right? Sorry, Austin, I think that was you.
Oh, I was actually just about to say what Enrico just said, because I know that there's discussions in this industry, right? There's the like the PLDM file IO protocol, right? And I think Enrique's point was like, we say, hey, just go use this, right? And so if there are existing standards or whatever out there, then, and those are all optional, but maybe this says, hey, if you want to be compliant to these OCP requirements, here's what you should do, right? And I agree with that.
And I guess that's like especially for the extraction, but you have just like this little, almost like dancing around an elephant, right? But that's exactly what I would want to see. Is like, let's pretend to, well, I think we almost actually agree anyway, right? to convince ourselves otherwise, right? Like these dumps probably out of band should be delivered as a as a PLDM file. It's just perfectly logical, right? And then our spec would basically state that, and then provide that the aspects of that file. Maybe there's some type 2 sensors and factors that need to go with it, and basically prescribe that construct. If you want to be compliant to the spec, you shall do your dump extraction this way.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's, and I guess the question there is okay, so we'd said, all right, we got these 8, we'll probably have to go off and define some APIs. We got to go rally around a protocol, figure out if we want a data packet, model. And then is there, I guess maybe your original question, is there anything else we're missing that would make this easier, right?
Exactly. Okay, so so we should just
yeah, the only other thing on the content, we had and I don't know if this is a good place to, but we had also stated that in addition to maybe picking the types of data like register contents or state config or whatever, there could also be an option to get encrypted debug data, right? For use cases that allowed that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
I would assume you're going to have I mean, just looking at your verbosity bullet down below, you'll probably have APIs for that.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, probably
you'll have to use.
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, that's probably the. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the.
Oh, I see you have it down there under security levels. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's one of exactly. I mean, it's one of the like dimensions of verbosity in my head, right? Is it is it encrypted, not encrypted? Is it
how detailed
let's say, is it CSP comprehensible, or is it obscure, right? Yeah, we may not, let's say you get a register dump from an integer view. It may not be encrypted, but you may not be able to make any sense out of it either, right? As somebody that's not Intel and doesn't have the Intel tools, right? That's what I mean. I mean, that it's 00A at address 088495, but without knowledge of what that register does and is, it's fundamentally useless. All right. Okay. Well, should we go talk about the log extraction a little bit? So, Enrico, what else needs to go in here? We have mentioned streaming. It could be local buffering, right? I guess that's the flip side. That's the opposite of streaming. Like the typical, Linux D message log, where it goes into the file system and you can go get it at any point in time.
I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think. Okay, again? It's back to the same. Like, okay, what kind of pieces do you need here, right? Again, there's got to be some type of configuration of the sources, right?
Yeah, because I mean, if you're especially if you're like streaming logging, the verbosity control as far as how much noise do I make is really important, right?
Yeah, that's going to be super important, right?
You don't want to have tons of chatter and nobody cares. Right?
Yeah, you may have start-stop triggering.
Yeah.
Right.
Or you may have like, always on. You have only critical errors that get streamed out, or if you even do that, or locally buffered in a versus if you're interested in something, you tell a specific component to become a little chattier, right? Austin, any other thoughts on the logging part?
I'm trying to think. I'm just scanning down the rest of the list to see if you had it somewhere else. But yeah,
overflow handling. Sorry, overflow handling.
Oh.
Because it's streaming, you'll most likely hit some overflows, right?
Yeah, and I mean, especially if you have the overflow handling, and then with that comes retention, right?
Sorry, Austin.
no worries. Yeah, give me.
Yeah, I mean, by retention, I mean, let's say you have, a data center machine that's running for 3 years straight, right? And how long do I keep my always on logs around, right? For a day, for a week, like, because it is, even if you are very disciplined in your chatter rate, right? This is gonna just the pile is gonna fill up eventually.
Yeah. And with that handling, I mean, those are things like flush and clear and things like that, right?
Yeah. Austin, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, I'll go back to the other one. Yeah, but on the overflow, yeah, there's also always the debate about when you overflow, what do you overwrite? Do you overwrite the oldest stuff first, or the newest stuff, or the what you deem the most important? So, yeah. Yeah, and then I was going to say on the local buffering one, I think we had mentioned too, there's it could be buffered locally, non-persistently, or in like non-volatile storage. But if there's volatile storage, but if there's non-volatile storage available, then that's probably preferable in some cases, so that if the device was, for example, power cycled or returned or something, you could still go back and get that data.
Yeah, but of course, with the non-volatile storage, then the overflow and retention becomes more important, right?
Yeah.
If it's volatile, the next crash the RAM clears out and it's gone. You probably need less of policies on to H data out or to override it, and you also don't have to worry about NVMe out or any of that.
Yep.
Not sure if there's anything around timestamping here.
Yeah, timestamping. Actually, timestamping is, yes, I'll put this under, I'll make this its own thing actually for right now. Until at least internally we had a ginormous debate about it this week. All right. Anything else on logs? Okay. We should go to
one other thing I just realized. I don't know how many people do this. I mean, arbitration of sources, right? I mean, you're funneling all of them together. Again, it's maybe a priority thing of if you have multiple sources coming into a funnel, do you have arbitration? Right?
Yeah, I think arbitration is a good one, right? And I mean, how do you arbitrate, right? Do you like,
is it round robin, or does somebody get priority, basically, right?
Yeah, or do you have a
time division multiplex,
or mesh it with the what is it, criticality, right? Like, everybody's critical errors make it through, and then the arbitration only kicks in on verbosity 2 or 3, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And the like uninteresting messages get dropped first. But then yeah, arbitration is interesting. I should go. Yeah, arbitration is a good one. Going to the telemetry, like my view is, I want to call this one out of scope. I think there is, Austin, isn't there? I'm convinced that there is telemetry working groups inside OCP that probably cover this. But I can't.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, do we want to make sure it works with us?
Yeah, no, yeah. So I'm gonna put an AR on myself.
I mean, some aspects may already be defined, and maybe we just we may just reference.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't see any issue with that.
Yeah. So I think if none of us just simply know, I find out the OCP landscape for telemetry before I call this in, like, it's heavily in scope. All right, and then this is kind of favorite passion topic of mine. It's basically the idea of what makes sense as far as the more interactive debug, right? You have let's say you have a system that the workload came to a screeching halt, but really none of the hardware is hanging, or at least some of the hardware is still in a place that you can interact with. So that's essentially the gist of interactive debug, which could also be part of like that. If you have a performance issue where things aren't running as fast as they're supposed to, but they're running, well, you could essentially log into a machine or start interacting with the machine without it crashing, and potentially do some interactive things. So here, I think I really want us to have a discussion, and I probably missed some points here, but I may kind of go through them. So the first one, I think maybe most important one, or just the first one, is kind of the idea of peek and poke, right? You are you go read registers and maybe modify some registers to see what's going on in the machine. Then we have the idea of, I put the idea in here of maybe actually doing error injection to artificially trigger an event and see if the how much it matches or doesn't match the signature we're seeing. And then there's some kind of this probably goes hand in hand with the idea of stimulating the system in some way. And then the thing I feel we shouldn't get ourselves hung up on, but that's probably an unpopular opinion, is any kind of like runtime control where we take a single device and make it start single stepping through its code or setting breakpoints. Because I personally believe that in a complex deployed system, that's just gonna make somebody else crash that is waiting on that processor that just stopped. Yeah. So thoughts and feedback on the interactive usages here.
I don't know. For me, I just feel like it's a lot of it's almost a subset of configuration, right? The difference between this and some of the others is just, I'm going to go in, I'm going to configure a few things, see what happened, and then do another extraction, right? That's kind of how I look at some of this stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, maybe, right? But I mean, you also have the like I think the, the probably the big part is actually this idea of injecting and stimulating, right?
Yeah.
Right. You know, if I believe
I'm changing
that,
something. I'm changing something about the system, and then
exactly,
and then going and seeing, okay, let me now do another extraction and see what changed, right?
yeah, or let's say I I have a suspicion that it is you know, the problem comes from a UAL cable disconnecting, and you know, maybe I go over there and unplug one of the UAL cables and see what that error signature looks like, if it, you know, in which way it matches the thing that I see periodically, right?
Yeah, so I think error injection is nice. We use this for debug. There is one example in OCP that does this today. You could kind of look at, but well, again, so I worked on NVMe. I'll go back to NVMe, but the OCP NVMe or data center NVMe spec has an error injection capability. One thing I would note about it. So some stuff is probably generic. It could be used for other types of devices, like if you're injecting like PCIe errors and things like that. A lot of it is very device specific though. So it's really very NVMe centric, and I think that may be true of a lot of things. They're going to be, each device is going to have a lot of different specific air injection that you would need for that particular component, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And Austin, is that in your experience, is the what is the use of the error injection? I mean, that's definitely I think it was primarily invented so one can test the error handling flows, right? But do you see it used a lot as a, you know, stimulating problems and to see if to understand signatures, if I call it that?
Yeah, it's a good point. I would agree. Historically, we've used it just during development so that we can test that the host is handling the error correctly.
Mm-hmm.
Using it for diagnostic and debug, yeah, it's an interesting thought. I don't know that. Well, I haven't used it that way. I'm not sure if other folks have, but yeah, I mean, perhaps it could be. I don't know. I'd have to think more on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I mean the idea of stimulating is definitely like probably going to be a pretty interesting and very complicated conversation once we get into it.
You're asking me to verify what
Yeah.
you're saying, and I'm telling you I can't. So
All right.
yeah.
Um, here, Rolf, do you see any other interactive activities?
Currently not, no.
Okay. All right. Right. I think you brought up the timestamping, so let's maybe collect some thoughts about them. I mean, I think the first one is that That makes sense. I'm saying here.
Yes, it does, but I guess the question becomes, okay, again, what kind of control do we want to provide? I mean,
Or do we want to, or is providing the control in our scope, or maybe our scope is limited to stating a requirement or a recommendation for a requirement, right?
yeah.
Because
I don't think there's any API per se, but then
yeah, I mean, we had a lot of internal discussions about this week, so it's fine. But I mean, for sure, if you're looking at a scaled out system of GPUs, right? If they affect each other, right, and you're looking at blocks from two places, you don't want to spend the first 2 hours trying to figure out how they align, right?
Right. I mean, you have to figure out the correlation between all your data, right?
Yeah, exactly. And like my view is that shouldn't be a project in of itself.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume some of these things like your trace extractions and things like that will have timestamping in there. But I'm trying to think what value can we add to that, right? It's unclear to me right now.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, and maybe we just ignore it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or we could say that for debug purposes, right? Here's the target, right? Which is probably looser than some other alignments that some processors might need, right? That's kind of where my
I don't know. I mean,
is it lately?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, I mean, every piece of data should be correlated. You should be able to correlate it with each other, right?
Yeah, and
right. But
time is the universal language to do that, right?
Right, but the problem comes down to is our synchronizing everybody to the same wall clock.
Exactly.
Right, and that's almost in some ways an impossible mission. So that's where I don't know where we can help, because again, if you can't correlate your data, that's not good. So I don't know what value we can add here. That's what's unknown to me. I don't know if others have some other ideas, but I just know, I mean, timestamping is always one of those fun items.
Yeah, keeping time synchronization is it's a fun topic, if not a science in of itself.
And then the other one that comes to mind as a totally different activity, and I don't know, I thought we talked about it, I don't remember where it is, but it's the getting, not configuring, but getting the configuration. So somewhere, one of our slides, we talked about getting like, okay, what firmware versions are you running? What configurations of that firmware, right? So I would assume that there's, again, a way to do that, an API to ask, hey, what's your configuration, some format of the data back. I mean, I don't know if that's a subset of something else, but there's also, I think that's always the big thing of, okay, what's my configuration, right? And I forget, I don't remember, I don't know if it was you, Austin, or someone had a fun, cool
probably
name.
Austin. He asked about that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Rightfully so.
But I thought there was a cool name that we had in one of your previous slide notes. But I think let's make sure we have that on this list too, because I think that was
getting configuration.
That was another important. Again, we may deem it as a sub item of dump extraction, for example, but but I think that is important enough to at least highlight something.
Yeah, and I mean, it's definitely one of those things that should be like, human comprehensible and universally understandable, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, I feel it might make sense here to say, okay, here's the minimum content that needs to be needs to be in that record, right?
Exactly. I mean, there should be a common API to say, go get it, right?
Yeah.
There should be a minimum set of information, probably some data format, right? That has versions and blah, 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 right? I don't know if I want to get into this, but do you need some level of, I'll say it, attestation of that information? And things like that, right? We'll probably need to talk about that, right? And where we can, our quote spec could help with to make it a lot easier when you have all these goofy, nodes and components to make sure that you're, hey, am I there?
And it also needs to be the, like, it needs to be kind of, self-describing, configurable, while being standardized. Right? It's actually kind of interesting, right? I mean, a given module may have, 2 firmware entities, right? That project a version number or 200, right?
Yeah. More or less, I think we'll probably be able to define a container, and then or some schema, right?
Some schema, yeah, something like that,
yeah. But we have to. I think again, it bears notice that's one of those things. Like, okay, there should just be I should just be able to say git config, and I should be able to know, okay, what am I all running, right? Where am I? What's my configuration? What firmware am I running? And know it right away, right?
Exactly. And then, I mean, there's a hierarchy to this too, right? Let's say you, I mean, there's a command to BMC, and then that BMC would collect it from all the devices in a given node, right?
Yeah.
All right.
So there seems to be, Marco, I guess, a lot of, I mean, I feel like the next step here is to pull out all those comments we made. Okay, these are the APIs, these are the formats, right? Because I think that's where it comes down to, okay, all right, now how do we do that? And where is there, first, is there value? Do we all agree there's value? What's out there to compare? What's out there today for some of these answers, and so on.
And I mean, agreed, but I think, well, and I think it's an argument we should probably have here, right? Like my view is, let's pick one of these, right? And go into the details, right?
Yeah, I still agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and okay, how do we want to do that picking? I have an opinion, but I'm not going to say it. I want to hear. Like, can we just verbally agree to something, or do I have to put out like a ballot and another doodle poll, which I quote.
I'll put my 2 cents. I think the bottom 2 bullets are pretty important, right? Right. I mean, getting the current configuration is usually step 1, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then the configuration, I think, is interesting because I think some of that stuff will hit all of those. It's the configuration plus the controls of others. And then the third one I'd put in there would be, I think, out of the top 4, I think dump is probably, I don't want to say it's the easiest, but I think it's straightforward. And I think that'll help give us a framework for the rest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. I want to hear from Brent and the others on the call before I'm saying what I think. I will attempt to be quiet. I'm trying hard.
You're just looking for which of these we should focus on first.
Yeah, that's basically not. We have to start somewhere, right?
Right. I think getting the current configuration makes sense.
Yeah.
And if you can't get that, well, then your device is in a really bad state, right?
Yeah. And if we can't agree on how to do that, then we'll probably.
Yeah, you're gonna have a heck of a time getting dump extraction if you don't even know how to read what device it is.
Yeah, and if we can't agree between us how to do configuration, right, then we're never ever going to agree on anything more complicated, right?
Yep.
I mean, okay. Rolf, what's your thought?
I agree. Makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, I think the hardest one's going to be the error injection and peek and poke on each device. Man,
interactive is going to be tough.
Oh, yeah,
that's very complicated. Some devices can do it, some can't, and the way you do it on some is easy, and there's very hard.
Yeah, anything interactive will be very hard. I agree with you. Yeah, I mean, I think yeah, let's go. I like to do this. So let's start with the current configuration and then probably move on to the dump extraction. Those are probably the two. You know.
And I got to find that cool. What we gave it a cool term, and I forget. Like I said, it's somewhere in your slides.
You're talking about the currency, code currency part.
Yeah, there's the cool word. There you go. That's the cool term. Really like that.
All right, cool.
I have one question. Do we assume we have multiple users accessing the same system or just one? Do we need to log those accesses, or most likely it's out of scope, but just for my interest, how you see that one?
Well, I would say from host side perspective, mine is yes, there could be multiple users. In particular, at least what we see a lot is that you could have some in-band agentry running within the host operating system that may be pulling debug data or streaming metrics out of the component or whatever. And then at least in our systems, we also have a BMC, which could be accessing the components using an out-of-band mechanism. And we do have, in a lot of cases, this gets addressed to the protocol. So just one example, going back to NVMe again, since that's where I spent a lot of my prior years. They have a crash dump file, and you can read it like in band and out of band, and there's ways to generate a crash dump. And so like if you're reading it out of band and then the in band agent went and generated a new crash dump, then that would make what the out of band agent is reading garbage, right? But there's ways to report that so that the out of band agent knows that it changed mid read and this kind of stuff. So and a lot of protocols do that. They kind of bake it in so that you can kind of share between the in-band host OS agent and a BMC.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything we need to address there, or you think no, it's not needed?
Well, yeah, I guess yeah, I think it's probably something we should consider. Like again, if I'm looking here under the dump extraction, there is that user triggered, and if you could have multiple users, one in band and one out of band, and they both have the ability to trigger a crash dump, and you could get something overwritten, then yeah, probably those kind of things would need to be comprehended. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, if we for a second pretend that this all, even just for out of band, right? This is all gets for a moment pretend this gets all mapped to to a Redfish API, right? It's multiple parties could be calling that in relatively short order, right?
Yep.
Okay, I should at least write it down as a. It's probably on a. It's probably not. Here is the. Okay. All right. We are basically out of time. So, so do we all agree that we want to go for the code currency first?
I don't think so.
I don't hear any protests. I'm just gonna call that a. This is. All right. Excellent. Great discussion. Again, the two big reminders for those who weren't here at the top of the meeting. No meeting next week, and kind of a call to action if you're interested in being one of the chairs in this for this group. Please send me a note, and in probably next month or in a week or two, I'll put out a doodle poll. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right.
Bye.